Hi there, I'm Lorraine Sommerfeld. This is the 6th season of the Lemonade Car Show. Get ready for the only automotive show that puts you, the consumer, in the driver's seat. We have combined decades of automotive experience in all facets of the industry. The topics we cover are those most relevant to you. I've been writing about cars and driving for over 10 years for the country's largest newspapers, but more importantly, I'm a consumer just like you. Lemonade is produced by the Automobile Protection Association, that's the APA. We take your questions, we help you navigate the crazy world of all things automotive. Lemonade is about you. Welcome to the show. George.
It's great to be here for the second
go. Here we go. George Iny,
rebooted show.
President of the APA. Kevin Bavelaar, you're my used car expert.
Thank you.
I don't think there's anything you don't know about the world of used cars, so I'm.
And if I don't know it, I'll make it up.
Well, that's what we all do. That's the way it goes. Okay, having said that, used cars is one of my favorite shows because we all own a used car if we own a car.
Yes.
And that bonds us all together because mostly we want to know what it's worth. Right off the top, can you explain to me why? I've got a friend who's trying to trade in her car, she thinks, and she goes, should I sell it? Should I trade it in? I know what I do because I'm lazy. Can you explain the difference between when you go in and they'll give you X for your car and you go, but I went on Auto Trader and it looks like it's worth that. Can you just explain that?
That's the most common thing that people get, and they get frustrated with that because you're right. The dealer gives them $3,000 for the trade-in, and they see it on the lot for $6,000 2 weeks later, not considering that there's a lot of reconditioning that has to go into the vehicle. They have to make some money on it. They're not necessarily going to get the $6,000 that they're asking for the car.
When you do an Auto Trader search, it's the asking price. It's not the price it actually.
Yeah, my brother John always used to say to people, they don't advertise the sale price. They only advertise the asking price, and it doesn't necessarily mean they coincide. And the other thing too is with trade-ins, what a lot of people, my biggest recommendation for people that are getting trade-in values is to get a second quote on it. It always amazes me that people will shop around for a new car and they'll go to 10 different dealers and they'll grind that price down to the last $50 and they'll say, oh, by the way, I got a trade in the park and I want to have a look at it. And the dealer gives them 2 G's less than what the car is worth. That's really, in a new car deal, your trade-in is really where the deal is made or broken.
So that's where the movement is. It's not on the new cars.
Absolutely. You can shop all those new car dealers and get your best price, but I'll bet you that if you take those same 10 car dealers and ask them what your used car is worth, you're going to have, depending on the car, of course, you could have thousands of dollars difference between the lowest appraisal bid and the highest appraisal bid.
Kevin, one thing we found in some markets, certainly in Vancouver, to a lesser degree in Calgary, you can't get a price on your trade-in.
No,
unless you've already signed an offer or something on a new car.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I'm sorry, you can't speak to the used car manager. I'm sorry, he's busy, or I'm sorry, I've got to write it up. If you want to get a number on your car, I've got to write it up.
So that's why it's good to have an idea of what it's worth, even in some fields, so that you can work against it.
Stop in either at a dealership selling the same brand. This is particularly true if you have you're switching like out of an import, let's say a Honda into a GM. Mm-hmm. The Honda dealer, if you might be able to offer you more for it because they're in the brand. Second, I would go to an independent dealer because they don't put you through the rigmarole.
They don't.
They may still not give you the number you want, but they're not going to tell you have to wait and see, you have to sign for a new car before they're going to give you a price.
And the other thing I always say is when you're going to get an appraisal like that at an independent dealer or an off-brand dealer, don't tell them you're buying a car. Ask them how much they'll write a check for that car. That's what we call an actual cash value. Because when you go into a dealership and you say, I want to buy a new X model, depending on how much profit they've got, they'll juggle those numbers every which way from Sunday to give you that number, that value of your trade-in. But if you go in and just say, I'm not buying anything, I'm just selling my car, you will now get the real value of what your car is worth, and then you can use that base number when you're negotiating on your new car to determine where you want to be.
The other thing I would suggest, I get to say this, you wait 1 minute, please.
Yeah.
Take it to your mechanic, spend $100, find out what the car is. Everyone thinks their car is in excellent condition. It might need brakes, it might have dents. You've been overlooking this stuff, so know yourself that it's in good mechanical shape, because they have to bring it all up to snuff. You have 10 seconds, go ahead.
We can help if you're in Toronto. We have an independent appraisal bid. We'll send you to a dealer who is not necessarily the one that will sell you your new car. They'll put a number on the old car.
So then you'll know.
You'll know, and they'll actually cut you a check for that amount, the actual cash value.
Correct.
So
Correct. Although that's not the best way to go about it. You're still better to trade it in because you've got to remember there's huge tax savings. Now, I also want to say, do we have 10 seconds for this?
Go ahead.
There's a big difference between taking a car that's worth $2,000 on trade and you putting it on Kijiji or AutoTrader to sell it because there's quite a bit of money being left on the table there. Compared to a car that's maybe $20,000, the tax savings alone on that car will make it way better for you to trade it in than it would be to sell privately. So you've got to be careful what level you're at.
And investigate the HST component because
Right.
you'll get that back on the difference between the new price and the trade-in price.
My understanding in most provinces, you could do them as part of the same transaction if you bring your private buyer to
Yeah.
the table.
It's provincially. It's not. There's no regulation against it. It's more of a relationship between the dealership you're dealing with. Because what you have to understand is, if you do that, bring your customer to their dealership, that dealership is now taking all the responsibility of the transaction between your car and that other customer, even though they have nothing to do with that transaction.
Okay, we're going to
Anything
come back
goes
to that complicated topic when we come back. We're going to go to break. We'll be right back. Lemonade Car Show. Welcome back to the Lemonade Car Show. I'm joined by George Iny, president of the APA, and Kevin Bavelaar, who knows all things about all used cars forever and ever. Fit that on a business card, Kevin. They changed legislation back for safety certificates last year, and they missed an opportunity to make sure that open recalls had been performed before cars changed title. And I personally thought that was a crazy chance they had to close that loophole, and they didn't do it. On used cars, open recalls. First, Kevin, why don't you explain what an open recall is?
Well, I mean, that's a recall that the car that needs and has not had performed as of yet, and they're usually free. Well, they're always free, but a lot of the times there's no parts available for them. That's why they stay open.
So, or the customer never brought it in.
Or the customer
previous
never brought it in.
owner.
Correct.
So when you're buying from a dealer, most people think that, hey man, it's got a safety certificate. If you're in Ontario, it was safety checked. Otherwise, it might be certified by a dealer under a program with the manufacturer. People believe that the recalls were taken care of, and they're not. So one of the things you need to do after you buy the car is register with the manufacturer as the current owner and see if there are open recalls for the vehicle.
We also suggest, or I also suggest, when you're looking at a specific car, you could check the VIN with the manufacturer or Transport Canada in most cases to see if there's open recalls.
So there's
yourself.
two databases. The government one has everything on it, but it isn't in real time. So if it cannot use the VIN to determine if there is an actual open recall on your car, but it will tell you what all the recalls were. Most manufacturers now have a real-time capability, and with the VIN, you will get either a ping, a yes or a no. You won't get necessarily a lot of detail, but you'll know if it has to come in. Where this problem occurs is that when people mistakenly think, hey, my car was certified or checked or whatever, I got a paper even for it, they assume that it's safe. But you can go home and your car a few weeks or months later catches fire when it's parked because of, let's say, an open fuel line recall or something like that.
But then there's the other issue though, and George and I have had this argument 1,000 times. Me and you have
But
talked
I always
about
won
this.
it.
Most of the time he does. Yes, most of the time he does argue. He wins in his own mind. So what the problem here is though, as a car dealer, you know, we wanna do the recalls too. If we can do it, we want to do it. But a lot of the times, the parts aren't available. Being an independent used car dealer, these manufacturers, they don't want to deal with us. They want to deal with first with their own cars in inventory, then with their customers, and we're like right on the bottom of the pile. A lot of times we just can't even get the recalls. But then the last thing that George and I were always talking about this, but you know, Honda had this airbag recall.
It's still open.
It's still open, but
people are still waiting.
But they're not waiting. I'm being told now that there's Honda dealers that have skids of these airbags in stock that are waiting to be put in the cars. They can't get them out of inventory. They want them gone. It's taking up room in their storehouses. They can't get the customers to come in and get the airbags.
Well, is this because the headlines fade? Because what happens is we've got this 24-hour loop and everyone's freaking out. All we heard about a year ago even was airbags, airbags, airbags. I'm scared to drive my car.
Right.
Now you're saying there's skids sitting there and no one's
Skids
bothering?
sitting in them, and they can't get them out of there. They're trying to move around them, and they're sending out notices to their customers saying, get in here and get these airbags, and people are like, you know, I got the kids' soccer game this weekend. I'm not going to be maybe next weekend, but we're going up north, so we'll try the next weekend.
Okay, well, here's the floor. People have got airbags that could conceivably cause death and injury, and it's horrible. It's shrapnel going off.
Not in Canada.
Not in Canada,
Okay.
but hotter
Actually,
states.
there's maybe 1 or 2 cases in Canada that have now just recently surfaced, but the risk is remote.
It is. But now a lot of people are still worried, but now these airbags are available.
Yes.
So if you've had one of those, just Honda or everybody?
I'm just referring to the Honda only because
Okay.
I spoke to a couple of Honda dealers that said we have tons of them, can't get them out of the showroom.
Time to go back and ask.
So Honda was in it further because they used the Takata bag longer
Okay.
than most people, but they also were privileged to be among the first to get the supplies in. The last of these vehicles will get their parts in 2018.
Okay.
But in the interim, and this is not just true for this recall, if you're watching the show, it's probably a good idea if you've moved since you bought the vehicle, or if you're a second or third owner, that you would go online, see if there's recalls, see if you have open recalls, and then consider bringing your vehicle in. About a third of vehicles are never brought in.
And your advice is exactly right. And I always told all my customers this, regardless of the open recalls, go and take your car to the nearest dealership. You just go into the business office, ask them to register it for you. They will, it's no charge. And every recall notice, any kind of programs that are on that car will now come to you. If you don't do that, all that information is being sent to the previous owner. So it's just a little bit of tidying up of the paperwork.
Now, if the federal government and the provinces talk to each other, that information would be updated normally, right? Because they know where you are, since you need to have a current address for a driver's license and also for the vehicle registration. But they talk past one another.
And that's probably not going to change anytime soon. So
Well,
when we
I wish it would. We have a very good Minister of Transport, federal, and he's more active than some of the ones we've had before. It's a problem that a working group could solve in a couple of years.
And consumers themselves, so be in touch with, it's your car, so be responsible for it. We'll be right back after the break. We will be taking your questions and Ask a Mechanic, Lemonade Car Show. Welcome back to the Lemonade Car Show, brought to you by Untitled. We're joined now by Chris Muir, who is all things mechanical. Kevin Bavelaar has agreed to stay on for one more segment because, used cars. I've got a good question for both of you. Kevin, you're going to like this one. A viewer wrote, I went to look at a used Mazda 3 at someone's home. I thought it was fishy, that's in quotes. No plate on the car, and the owner couldn't tell me about his own car. Any thoughts?
Well, you're probably dealing with what we call in the industry a curbsider, which is somebody who's what I would say is in the business of selling used cars, but not registered in the business of selling used cars. So they're not regulated. They don't have to follow any rules. A lot of the times they're selling cars that they bought privately from somebody else, cars with problems in them, accident cars that they're not going to disclose. Really, it's the Wild West. And I always try when you're going to somebody's driveway to buy a car, you need to see the ownership of the vehicle, check the person who you're dealing with, driver's license, make sure the picture matches up with the person you're talking to, and make sure that the ownership has that person's name on it. A lot of times you're going to hear, I'm selling it for my aunt, I'm selling it for my uncle. That's fine, I need to speak to your uncle. If they tell you that their uncle's out of the country because they moved and now you're just selling the car for them, these are all red flags that you really need to keep, keep your radar on when you see these kind of things.
And the other thing is, OMVIC registers dealers for used car dealers and new dealers. You can ask for that certification as well if you're going to a dealer.
If you're going to a dealer, yes.
Because sometimes even places with lots and lots of cars on their lots are still doing the same thing. It's just a bigger enterprise of curbsiding. So you do have to be careful. You can't just, and if a deal's too good to be true, then it probably is.
Right, but the last thing, forget about everything I just told you. The most important thing when you're buying a used car is have the car inspected by a qualified mechanic before you hand over any money. That is, if you don't listen to another thing I ever say in my life, that's the number one important thing.
Actually, Chris and I made a video for the National Post, who I write for, and we did a video, and Lorraine explains about what it is you're actually checking when you bring it in and get it up on the hoist. So I suggest, go to driving.ca and check that out as well, because that was a really good afternoon.
But I want to also clarify, I said qualified mechanic. I've seen people take cars off my lot, because we allow mechanical inspections, go to their mechanic. The mechanic comes out to the parking lot, looks the thing over, rev. Okay, yeah, sounds good to me. Make sure your mechanic is putting the thing on the hoist. Make sure they're doing a proper job. If they're, make it clear that you're buying this car. You want to make sure you're not getting into a headache.
And invest an hour of shop time to save
Absolutely.
yourself so many headaches down the road.
Absolutely.
A lot of people go, oh, it'd be another $120 I don't want to spend. It's like, are you kidding me?
You're
Best,
spending,
Because we get a call.
best $120 you'll ever spend on that particular car ever.
Well, we get the call the week later. So I bought this in the past tense, and then
And
we're
you're
stuck
stuck.
with this new thing.
Yeah.
Okay, another question I want to ask you. People sometimes want to repaint their cars. And since all new cars are only white, silver, gray, or black, I understand that. But what does that do to the value of a car? Oh, come on, one of you's got to bite this.
it depends what the car is and what you want to do with the car. For the resale value of a new car, if you change the finish on the car, you have detracted from the value of the car. There's really not two ways about it. If you bring it in for trade-in, they can actually see that the paint is thicker than it's supposed to be, and it's instantly devalued your car. In the eyes of someone who wants to trade it in, you start checking registrations, and you see that it's a different color, a different tone. It never has that same factory luster.
Better to leave a couple of scratches and chips and the odd door ding in that car, but leave it original paint than to repaint any panels that don't need it. Now, this obviously we're not talking about 1969 Camaros that you want to change from a black to a red. That doesn't count. We're talking about your average run-of-the-mill five-year-old to new car. You don't want to put any paint if you don't have to.
I've seen some cars running around there, the matte black, and I've seen the matte black on a couple of Mercedes, actually. It looked beautiful, and I've seen it looks like someone took a roller and a can of paint and did it themselves. If you're going to do something that extreme to a car, are you kind of dooming yourself to keeping it forever?
Yes.
Oh,
Absolutely.
okay.
No, as somebody who likes to buy vehicles that aren't exactly what you might call pristine, because I like to run them into things.
That's your Crown Vic out in the parking lot.
Exactly. Anytime that you've seen that two-tone, right? It's the car's original paint and then the black bottoms. What are you hiding from me? You see them paint it with a roller. Well, you didn't care enough to maintain the finish on this car. What else have you half put together?
Yeah, and you're right. Anytime when we take a trade-in into inventory, the very first thing we do is take a paint meter. It's a special gauge. Well, most reputable used car dealers or new car dealers have it. We walk around the whole car, and it'll tell us the thickness of that paint in microns, and we can tell you which panel's been painted and which one hasn't. And and the thing is it may have been an innocent little tiny scratch that you got in the garage and you painted it, but in the person who's looking at that car, to us, the thing was somebody died in it, and they had to re-weld the whole front end back together on it. So you have to remember, if we can't see what the damage was, we take a worst case
You'll
scenario.
assume the worst. Someone died in it.
Right.
Yes.
Not someone backed into me at the Y, but somebody died in
Right.
it.
Right.
Okay, well, so leave the color of you. Buy the color you want, or
Yeah.
paint it and keep it forever.
Yeah, I had a customer came in and said that they wanted to take their, because we do body shop work as well for people, and he said they wanted to change the color of the car. I said, just go and pick the color of the car you want and go buy that car and sell this one. You'll be way better off at the end of the day. Not to mention that there's nobody out there, not the best body shop in the universe, can't put the paint on the way your manufacturer did. So you're going to see that car is going to chip easier.
Yep.
The paint is going to be weaker than it is manufacturer-wise.
So you won't be as
So
happy.
even though it's going to look great the day you got the thing painted, in a year from now, you're going to be unsatisfied with the result.
Thanks to Kevin Bavelaar. When we come back, more questions for Chris Muir, Lemonade Car Show. Welcome back to the Lemonade Car Show. We're rejoined by George Iny and Chris Muir, who's our mechanic today. George, you wanted to add, we're talking about repainting and matte finishes, and you had something you wanted to tell our viewers.
Well, just another option is if you want to change the color of your vehicle is a wrap. So that's where a sheet is applied to the panels. It's cut to the size of the actual, and you can get some pretty unique finishes.
They look
Absolutely.
amazing.
Yeah.
You see a lot of them for advertising when they're wrapping
That's
trucks
right.
and buses
Exactly.
and
That's right.
cars.
Yeah.
And that also protects your original paint.
It does.
Yeah.
And when you pull those off, you've got this pristine paint job.
Well, you also have to know what you're doing when you pull them off.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
didn't think people are going to do it in their driveway with a blow dryer. I mean, I know they got to,
Right.
go to a wrap place and do it, but it is an
So
option.
it's been a bit of a revolution for people who are into like
Mm-hmm.
decorating or changing their car, their appearance of their car, want a custom finish.
Okay. Now we've got Chris here. We've got a question we're going to take from a viewer, and I think we've got that queued up.
My name is Albert from Montreal, Canada. I bought an Excel Honda in March 2000 and Honda Civic. One of the features that I like is when you put your hand on the door handle and the truck handle, the door or the trunk opens up. A few weeks after I got the car, the feature stopped working. first at the door, followed soon after by the trunk. I contacted the salesman, who did not seem to care much about it or knew about it. He advised me to contact Honda Canada, contacted Honda Canada, who made arrangement for me to bring the car to Excel service. They took the car, they checked it, and they said that they are aware of it. Honda is working on it, and they can do nothing about it. I followed up a few times after that, and no answer. When I called again, Honda Canada, they don't seem to know about it. I don't find it normal that a new car can give me such a problem, and I think they should replace the car for me and upgrade it. Thank you.
2 questions. I'm going to start with Chris first. Why would that fail?
Well, we should explain what the feature is.
Okay.
So on some new cars now, they're keyless, and the car detects because you're holding a fob when you're close to it. So when you put your hand on the door, it automatically unlocks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, you don't even have to press a remote like you
No.
used to.
It just senses.
Yeah.
It's a sensor. Okay.
Something's going on there, either with programming or the component itself that senses your hand at the door. Obviously, if you walk by with your key fob, you don't want your car to give you a yard sale as you walk away from it in the parking lot. So there has to be something on the trunk and on that door handle that senses a hand near or on it. So it's possible that something environmental is causing these radar sensors to goof up. It could also be that the transmitter in your pocket isn't communicating properly with the car. It could be a software issue, it could be a hardware issue, and it would be something that there's going to eventually be either a TSB or a recall on to ensure customer satisfaction with it.
Have you heard anything about this at the APA, or is this common?
It's not the first time we've had this complaint on the Civic, which is otherwise an excellent, the new Civic is a car that's won awards. It's very good. But when a feature doesn't work as a car maker, if you can't get it to work, you've got to offer something to consumers. Mm-hmm. And so this is, I'm hoping that Honda will have it fixed. The other option for someone like that is to consider maybe the arbitration program that's available for new car buyers. It's called CAMVAP. The difficulty with CAMVAP is they don't accept what's called a design flaw.
And that would fall into this category.
I don't know.
Well, that
Maybe
doesn't
Honda
make the
would
car
say
a lemon like
it's
it
not.
doesn't.
The car makers, Ford is famous for that. They say it's normal that your transmission shifts lousy. They all do it, so you don't have a case. I think in this case, because it worked initially, they couldn't really argue that it was supposed to not work, that that's normal. And then the arbitrator would have a decision. The vehicle could be ordered back to a Honda dealer for a real repair, or they would have the option of ordering a refund of the vehicle
If
price.
we see more people coming forward with this problem, is Honda more likely to step up and issue a
Well, I think the
bulletin,
APA
or-
is more likely to step up, because Honda already sees the complaints. These are people who are under warranty. They've already reported it. One of the things car makers will sometimes do as well, and I should say not Honda because they tend to be on top of things, but is that if there's a fatigue factor that sets in. Initially, you want it fixed, and they don't do it. Then you're not happy. Then you're madder than hell. And then you give up and move on.
It's like the
because the car isn't immobilized. Exactly.
airbag factor.
Right.
You
So
start to go away from it.
at a certain point, you get what's called like a complaint attrition,
Yeah.
and maybe you try and write it out.
So they don't go away, but they fall off,
They
Right.
become complacent.
Right.
and it goes.
Mazda had a problem. I don't know if you remember some time back. Their door lock, if you punch the door, you could unlock the car on the Mazda 3.
Oh, handy.
Yeah, and their position at the time initially was that there wasn't a problem with the car, it was a problem with the thief. So it's a societal problem. It
That's
wasn't
awesome.
their problem. Right.
That's awesome.
Right. So it worked for a while, and then perhaps partly because of the internet and also because of the environment around consumer protection has evolved,
Yeah.
they eventually came out with a reinforcement for the door. But it was a bit of the same situation where initially the car maker didn't really step on it until they had to kind of open up, be a little more quick to move on it.
One of the beauties of the internet is it signals out to all like-minded people that you're not alone, and other people are suffering from this, and maybe put some energy and elbow grease into it.
And then the other thing is for our caller, definitely get on record. So you need to
Start-
send an email,
start
something
the
nice.
chain.
Yeah.
So it's on record, so when they do start addressing it, he'll be the first in line. Thank you, guys. The Lemonade Car Show is brought to you by OMVIC, that's Ontario's Motor Vehicle Industry Council, and Crown Rust Proofing. Next week, please come back. We'll be talking about insurance with Deb Arnold from Sound Insurance. And you know what? The insurance show is always crazy because the insurance industry is always changing about as quickly as the automotive one. Thanks very much. We'll see you next week.